Hello, and welcome to today's webinar on design thinking hosted by the Partnership for Food Safety Education and the Social Marketing Association of North America. My name is Brittany Saunier, and I am the Director of Development at the Partnership and your moderator today. Next, please. Thank you so much for joining us. We are so happy to have you viewing this webinar. A little bit about the Partnership. The Partnership for Food Safety Education develops and promotes effective education programs to reduce foodborne illness risk for consumers. And we are a nonprofit organization, so we rely on grants and donations to be able to do things like host today's webinar. Next, please. Little bit of housekeeping. We will be able to take questions for today's webinar. We will host a Q&A toward the end. To ask a question, please use the question box on the right of the screen. Also, after the webinar, you will receive a brief survey. Please fill that out. This will help us improve our webinar experiences for the future. Next, please. And we are so happy to be able to offer continuing education units. You can get these by downloading them on the sidebar that's labeled handouts. They are also in the follow-up email. And you can also access them at fightback.org under the Events tab and Webinar Recordings. We are offering a new opportunity through the Certified Public Health. You could access this through the National Board of Public Health Examiners website. So that's NB for board, P for public, H for health, E for examiners.org. And they have an online portal there where you can insert the webinar information to receive continuing education units. Next, please. Today's webinar is part of a series on behavior change. In the next webinar, we will bring all the concepts together for a full picture on impacting behavior change. So please mark your calendars on October 4th to bring all these ideas together and provide impactful programming. Next, please. We have a wonderful panel of speakers for you today. We'll have Alexandra Born-Kessel. She's a senior strategist from RTI International, sharing with you design thinking. We have Kelly Dennings with the Social Marketing Association of North America, today's co-host, and myself, the moderator, Brittany Saunier. But not included on this side, and very important to today's webinar, is Michelle Blake, who is leading our technical aspect of today's event. And we just want to say thank you all so much for being part of this webinar. Next, please. So before we begin, Kelly Dennings is going to share with you a little bit about the Social Marketing Association of North America. Kelly?
Thank you. So the Social Marketing Association of North America, finally called SMANA, is a membership organization serving the professional needs of behavior change agents in Canada, the Caribbean, Central America, Mexico, and the United States. We incorporated in June of 2016. And for those working globally, SMANA is actually a regional group that is part of a larger federation through the International Social Marketing Association. So there are similar groups in Europe, Australia, and soon Africa. We say that we advance behavior change for social good. Our members are change agents from all sectors: social marketers, behavioral scientists and economists, conservation psychologists, environmental educators, behavior change communicators, cause marketers, entertainment educators, health communicators, design thinkers, and really the list goes on. We take a very big tent view of having members from anywhere that you're doing social good. Next slide. Our membership promise is to build a stronger legacy, build a stronger legacy and community of practice, provide assurance that our efforts are scientifically rigorous and informed by practice, facilitate opportunities for networking and learning, advocate for the advancement and use of social behavior change strategies. Next slide. So membership benefits include guaranteed admission to regional networking events, support of our free social marketing listserv. If you're not on that, just Google that. Access to 6 webinars per year, valued at $50 per webinar, run through the International Social Marketing Association. Ask the Expert sessions and discounts on conferences and journals, specifically 20% off the Social Marketing Quarterly Journal. As I mentioned, we have practitioners, students, and academics involved from environmental, health, and public safety fields. I invite you to join our website, visit our website at SMANA.org for more information. Regular membership dues are $55 and students pay only $30. And joining SMANA gets you simultaneous membership into ISMA. So now is the time to get involved to help build and mold this new organization, invest in our profession, and help support the larger social change community.
Great. Next slide. Thank you, Kelly. We're so glad to be able to partner with SMANA on the series. Thank you. So up next, we'll hear from Alexandra on design thinking. Alexandra Bornkessel is a senior strategist with RTI International Center for Communication Science, where she marries marketing concepts with behavior change science to solve meaningful problems. Thank you so much, Alexandra, and take it away.
Great, thank you, everyone. I want to ask you all a question. How are you doing behavior change with people, for people? That's the question for today, and maybe you're not. So today we hope you walk away with a greater understanding for how design thinking can benefit your behavior change programs while equipping you with a starter pack of go-to tools you can start applying immediately. Next. More importantly, perhaps, may today shift our mindset and challenge us to think about how we can create people-centered food safety programs. Effective health communication and behavior change initiatives require us to break brains, meaning the assumptions and the expectations they hold, and design thinking can help. It requires us, though, to wear a hat of students as well as experts, and suggest that research can be a part of the journey, not a stop along the way, to help us better walk alongside the people we serve and create solutions together. Next. Speaking of hats, I asked you to think about the hats you wear when you approach your behavior change program. Each offers a particular lens for us to view our work. As a way of introduction, I offer up some of the hats I wear when approaching social marketing and behavior change. With a background in journalism, I discovered the field of social marketing and saw it as the perfect blend of research, communication strategy, and creative problem solving that makes a difference. I'm grateful for having been a part of designing and managing over a dozen national and grassroots campaigns where design goes beyond creating the right mix of media and messaging, but fully thinking through the 4 P's of marketing: product, place, price, and promotion. My work typically involves wielding the power of technology, especially digital and social media, to facilitate and prompt behavior change, and coming full circle, having the opportunity to stay curious and apply investigative and collaborative research skills in new and evolving forms. It's an honor today to share some of what I've learned along the way with you. Next. The hats go beyond a simple metaphor. Edward de Bono, a psychologist, physician, and teacher of thinking, actually developed a process for critical problem solving called 6 thinking hats. It's the first design thinking tool I offer up for you today. 6 thinking hats is a process groups can use to reflect on and evaluate proposed ideas resulting from a brainstorming session, where each hat represents a particular lens. For example, let's say you worked on the 4-day throwaway campaign, brainstorming how you might help protect consumers from bad leftovers. And one idea that rose to the top was developing an app families could download, putting proper storage times and more at their fingertips. Next. You may opt to utilize the 6 thinking hats method to further refine and evaluate that idea. Each person on your team would be assigned with a particular hat to wear during the activity, with the person wearing the blue hat charged with planning and facilitating discussion. To illustrate it further, the person wearing the white hat might offer wisdom on the challenges in sustaining mobile app adoption, or suggest that formative research revealed people were more likely to engage on social media than through a mobile app. Or perhaps they know resources are tight, so the person offers a web app might be more feasible than a native app, all drawing on facts and what is known. And on down the list with each hat's lens helping to further flesh out the idea. My question to you for reflection is, what hats do you bring to your behavior change work? And are there certain hats in need of a workout? When you envisioned this theoretical brainstorming session that I described, was it solely you and your immediate team or colleagues around a table, or were members of your priority audience included? That's the true mindset shift, offering our priority audience a seat at our table. This brings us to our first poll. Next, thank you. If you could take a minute to answer, what hat do you wear most when designing behavior change programs? Is it that of gatekeeper, a champion, implementer, researcher, or evaluator? And I'll give you a moment to do so. Okay. One last moment. Michelle, I'll let you make the call of when to close. Great, thank you. Interesting. We love our data, right? When we're in behavior change, we have a large amount of implementers, followed by researchers, champions, and gatekeepers, and evaluators. Excellent. It's very helpful to know, and especially when we have our concluding webinar, which was mentioned earlier in October, we'll try to make sure that we're speaking to the different hats that everyone wears around the table. Next. So before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's dive into our crash course on design thinking through a social marketing behavior change lens. Simply put, design thinking is a creative process for problem solving with people, for people. I also like to look at design thinking within the broader context of participatory research. Participatory research, also referred to as design research in some circles, is the co-construction of research between researchers and people affected by the issues under study and our decision makers who apply research findings. There's different flavors of participatory research. You may have heard participatory action research, human-centered design, user-centered design, community-based participatory research, and design thinking. The design thinking process starts with empathy and encourages divergent and convergent thinking where assumptions are identified, data is gathered, and those same assumptions and project parameters are revisited throughout the project lifecycle. Core to design thinking is its iterative nature. Next. Design thinking is a people-centered process for innovation that ensures solutions we generate are desirable, feasible, and viable. Desirability means it meets the needs, hopes, and fears of the people we are trying to serve. Feasible in terms of the possibilities within technology limitations. Viable, meaning that it supports business or organizational objectives, truly sitting at that sweet spot of marrying user needs with business and organizational goals. Next. As you venture into design thinking, you may feel uncomfortable. That's a good thing. Lean into that. What I know for sure is that being uncomfortable can be a source of great learning, growth, and inspiration. IDEO.org is a well-known organization that champions the utility and value of design thinking. Going back to our theme of mindset, IDEO offers 7 key mindsets we should have as we draw inspiration and move through the design thinking process of ideation and implementation. You may even feel a bit uncomfortable reading these. Ambiguity, failure, iteration. I have to ask other people what they think of my ideas. My ideas might not be the best ideas. That can feel uncomfortable. Keep going. Walk through that. Aim for progress and not perfection. The benefit to your program is on the other side. Next. Let's explore those benefits a little bit more. Diving into the research behind the more global understanding of participatory research, the benefits speak for themselves. A 2012 review of literature across 7,100 abstracts, including 591 full-text papers, identified a final group of 23 efforts described across 276 publications. That's a lot of knowledge and evidence. They were synthesized with 7 core benefits rising to the top, which are presented here. In designing our behavior change programs, we want to be culturally appropriate, competent, offer greater quality in seeking better outcomes, to support sustainability and beyond. And design thinking can help make that happen by further connecting us with our priority audiences. Next. I'm not the only one recognizing the potential in design thinking. We see empathy and elements of design thinking across many areas in the health field, some even describing it as the new scientific method. Next. Thank you. We understand that everyone has the potential to be creative. If you're that person who says or thinks they don't have a creative bone in their body, design thinking asks you to think again. You can do this. Key in the context, Key in the context of behavior change, social marketers also support design thinking. This March publication in Social Marketing Quarterly is offered by a group of researchers who share their learnings and reflections on using design thinking. Notably, they call out relevance to the social marketing planning process. There are many social marketing planning models that you may use. The key is to use one. What design thinking offers compared to others is that there are many opportunities to gather insights from your priority audience along the way, allowing you to be truly people-centered. The design thinking model is also meant to be iterative, meaning that you don't go through one phase and you're stuck only having to move forward, that you can revisit the different phases as you learn and grow and get more insight from your users. Which brings us to our next poll. To what extent are you already integrating design thinking in your work? Not at all, not yet. Maybe you were, but you aren't anymore. You're dipping your toes in here and there, or you're already all in applying different design thinking methods. We'll give you a moment to answer this poll. Okay, just a couple more seconds. Last call. All right, Michelle, drum roll, what are our results? Okay, not yet, but would like to, and some of you are already dipping your toes in. A close tie, excellent, okay. We're already talking with the converted, which is great. Which means we'll move on in our presentation. Next slide. Speaking of planning models, we have a current gap in social marketing where many of our planning models can feel a bit antiquated. They're great, they have great evidence, we know they have worked well, and we can take a lot from them. And by all means, they offer a starting place. Some researchers and designers are evolving our current models, however, to integrate aspects of design thinking in search of greater connection with priority groups and flexibility given advances in technology. This brings me to the case of Vegathon, a theory-based mobile app intervention to increase vegetable consumption. While not food safety specific, there's a good amount of methodological inspiration we can grasp from this work. It's the most sophisticated approach I've seen, at least, that's grounded in rigor and combines design thinking, behavioral science, and technology. To be clear, I wasn't involved in this effort. I'm just a fangirl of what they've accomplished and are currently pursuing. Next. A little bit more about Vegathon. It's a health and diet app developed by Stanford School of Medicine, enabling users to track their vegetable intake. And as mentioned, there's been no published frameworks that appear to combine behavioral theory, design thinking, evaluation, and dissemination into a comprehensive step-by-step process for guiding digital interventions to change behavior. This gap limits our ability to advance health behavior change research and practice. That is, until Vegathon came along. To address this need for an integrated planning model, they developed and introduced Ideas, a framework to better guide the development of digital health interventions to change behavior, a visual of which is depicted here. Ideas was informed by a multidisciplinary team and then applied to and refined in the development of Vegathon, the mobile health intervention. Next. I'm not going to go through these next two slides very in depth, but I wanted you to see the high-level steps that the Ideas framework offers. If you refer to some of the go-to social marketing planning models like CDC Synergy's planning approach or NCI's Pink Wheel approach to developing health communication, you'll see a lot of synergies with this Ideas framework, along with synergies from the design thinking process that we just talked through. So I love that this framework starts first with, we're going to emphasize that's a very much a design thinking component. We're also going to specify the target behavior grounded in the problem we're trying to solve and behavioral theory, which is the best practice in all social marketing initiatives. We're also going to ideate and prototype, which is also borrowed from design thinking. Next. We're going to gain user feedback, not just as a one-time milestone, but throughout the way, creating the initial pilot and evaluating our metrics and sharing those findings forward. Next. What I also like about the work surrounding Vegathon is that they create a toolkit of behavioral strategies that they integrated into their intervention design. And so as you're working on your food safety interventions and programs, you might ask, what's our toolkit of behavioral strategies? Have we defined those and documented those to help align everything that we're trying to do and strengthen your use of them? The next slide takes that a little bit further. They also create a list of their different behavior change techniques, defined what those were, and then noted how they were integrated into the app's features and functionality set as well. Next. A small pilot randomized controlled trial was conducted with the Vegathon app, and it's currently in a larger randomized controlled trial, so we don't yet have results from the larger trial, but we do know from the initial pilot that it demonstrated initial efficacy and user acceptability. And I share this case study with you because you'll want to pull from the evidence and what we know works from behavioral theory, creating your behavioral toolkit, identify what your behavior change techniques might be, what planning model you'll use to develop your intervention or program. But that also might mean that you need to blaze new trails in navigating the how we best apply social marketing and design thinking to the specific problem you're trying to solve. Next. Before we close today, I want to be sure each of you have some go-to design thinking tools you can start applying in your work immediately. And here's a simple yet powerful one: challenge statement. In social marketing, we know we need to define our problem statement and behavioral objectives. To help solve for that problem, use the how might we phrasing to form a challenge statement that serves as a launch pad for ideation activities. For example, in this moment, my aim is to explore how might we use design thinking to influence food safety behaviors. Getting more specific and pulling from the earlier example, I'm also going to go through these tools from the lens of how might we use design thinking to promote proper care of leftovers. Next. The next tool I bring to your attention is journey mapping. Journey maps are a visual display that identify the different touch points or moments that characterize a person's interaction with a product, service, or decision point. It helps us understand the full context that our users experience in the problem that we are trying to address. It also uncovers additional opportunities to reach and engage people that we may have overlooked or not thought of previously. So next. So how might we use journey mapping to better understand how families experience a behavior, such as preparing and retrieving leftovers? And you can start this individually, you can do it as a team, and you can also use journey mapping in a way that with your end users and your priority population. So you might just get started sketching and brainstorming at your desk. On a piece of paper, you can draw 12 different large squares, identify what you want your starting point to be and your ending point. Maybe the starting point is trying to plan a meal or going to the store. The ending point might be when the food goes bad. What are all the steps that happen from planning the meal or shopping for the food to when the food goes bad? That when you write all those steps out, you'll also be able to identify what assumptions you're bringing and which ones you might want to challenge or get more feedback on. Now, if you don't want to just do this alone, you can do it at an upcoming meeting where you use a whiteboard, and as a team, you have your starting point and your end point, and you create the journey together. And you talk about the different scenarios, what someone might be feeling along that journey, and document what you learn. You might even want to take a version of either a blank journey map or one that you've completed or partially created, and invite the people you serve to also create the journey map or provide input on what you've developed so far. Next. Another tool that you might consider are personas. Personas are fictional characters we create that depict different audience clusters or segments. They're human-like snapshots based on research, but that depict user groups who exhibit similar attitudes, goals, and behaviors. What I like most about personas is that they put a name to the people that we're trying to support. It also, in some ways, forces us to go beyond simply thinking about demographics as a form of audience segmentation, but also look into goals and psychographics and different dimensions of what makes a person and how they might be bringing that to the problem that we're trying to solve for. Next. So how might we use personas to better describe, think about, and relate to people we serve? Maybe that's families trying to extend the life of prepared meals. To develop your personas, you might start with research gathering. What data do you already have at your fingertips? What literature is available, environmental scanning, user interviews, etc. You can use what's called an empathy map. I think of it as a quick and dirty version of a persona that also helps you serve as a tool to help you aggregate and analyze your qualitative data. So as you're doing your research gathering and reviewing what you have found so far, you can create a quick 4-quadrant diagram with your user in the middle and have a stack of Post-its next to you. And as you're digesting the information, be thinking about what are you learning about what your population says, thinks, does, and feel when it comes to the problem and the behavior that you're trying to develop a solution for. then your empathy map can be used as a starting point to developing a more fleshed out persona. There's also this concept of jobs to be done. That as you move from your empathy map to your persona, you can think about the goals that the people you serve through a job to be done lens. Because if I'm a user who is trying to extend the life of my prepared meals, my goal might not necessarily be to avoid bacteria in my food or foodborne illnesses. My goal might be to stretch my budget, or my goal might be to avoid the chaos of dinner time, or to be able to take my lunch to work versus having to purchase a lunch or just not eat lunch. So those might be more of the user goals and the jobs to be done that our users might be thinking about in this scenario versus kind of more the organizational goal of, well, we want them to avoid a foodborne illness. So that's a little bit of how empathy maps and personas can help us get in and stay in the minds of actual people and what their needs, motivations, and goals are. Next. The last tool I bring to your attention is quite broad. It's prototyping, and I bring it to your attention because it can encourage us to think visually. Prototypes are tangible iterations of a concept. They can range from low fidelity to high fidelity, very produced iterations of a product or material or resource that we're creating. It can range from you're at a lunch meeting and you're really having a great brainstorming session, so you start drawing on the back of your napkin. And that might be a prototype that you then bring to a meeting or take to your supervisor to further talk through and get input on. All the way to the other side of the spectrum of you might get to the point where you've done some initial iteration like that and beyond that in terms of maybe paper-based prototypes or using real materials like the picture here, and want to do something a little bit more produced where you involve creative specialists or a designer or video producer, things of that nature. What's nice about prototyping is that it helps get concrete about the abstract ideas that people might be brainstorming and changing back and forth. And it offers the ability to get more immediate feedback versus trying to have to wait for long development times. And it enables you to fail fast, to learn quickly and adapt along the way. So if we apply this to our scenario next, how might we generate more ideas, better solutions, and fail fast as we think about families during mealtime? And we can do that by starting to think visual. We can keep Post-its, markers, and whiteboards by our side on our desk, bring them to meetings. We can encourage drawing and sculpting, building, and collaging. I've had before people bring magazines to meetings, and we're going to rip out the pictures and collage together what we're envisioning, or what represents what we do want, or what represents what we don't want. And we might storyboard a quick low-fidelity prototype and challenge ourselves to draw it and then ask for additional feedback. And we'll do that on a very iterative basis. And what's key with prototyping is when you hear terms like co-creation and co-design, it's ensuring that the population we're serving has a seat at that table, that they are invited into those activities. They can help us storyboard. They can help draw and think visually. They can contribute how different graphical or multimedia pieces might come together. So we're just really encouraging us to stay in that people-centered mindset and all the different types of activities we do, no matter what tool we bring to the table. Next. This brings us to our last poll. For those of you, especially, it sounds like a lot of you are already doing some design thinking or you're wanting to be doing more of it. What's your greatest barrier? Is it time? Is it resources? Is it lack of support and understanding, whether that's within yourself or among the people you're working with or stakeholders that are involved? Is it that you or your organization just aren't sure where to start, or that you're skeptical of its promise, and think that there's a lack of evidence. So we'll give you a moment to answer this poll. I don't know about any of you, but I had the Wheel of Fortune theme song going on in my head, thinking of Vanna White. All right, we'll give you a couple more seconds. Okay, we have some split findings. Fascinating. Lack of time, lack of support and understanding, and don't know where to start. Just about have a three-way tie. Encouraging for someone like me to see the skeptical of its promise, because there really is a lot of momentum to integrate and support design thinking methods into our behavior change work. And it's exciting to see that we are, if you think of that diffusion of innovation curve, that we're kind of through the skepticism and ready to adopt, which is great. Okay. Well, hopefully we've offered some tools in terms of where to get started and how to move forward. I want to revisit your answers in the final webinar in October, just to help further equip you in how do you take all these tools, especially with that lack of time. I've experienced that and been challenged by that, in different situations, and that might be something we could definitely dive in deeper on the next session. So there's some references here that were used to help develop today's presentation. On the next slide, I also created a Twitter stream at this link. It's also pinned to my profile on Twitter, where a lot of the resources we talked about today are linked as well, along with some bonus resources that we won't have time to get into today, but I thought would be helpful as you're trying to navigate this space. Thank you so much for your time today, and I hope this offers some information that you can start applying immediately as you continue your design thinking journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra. You shared so much valuable information, and it's great, and we learned quite a bit, so thank you for your time today. At this time, as you can see, we'll be taking questions, so if you have any questions for Alexandra, go ahead and put them in the chat field there on the right. As you're doing that, just a reminder that the webinar will be available for viewing afterward. It is being recorded, and we are offering CEUs, and that information is accessed there on the side panel under handouts. And we also will have them under the events tab on fightback.org, as well as instructions in the post-webinar email, just as a little reminder. So let's see what kind of questions we have. Give me just a second. I guess we'll go ahead and start with this one. Alexandra, if some steps are skipped, does this model or process still work?
Yes, absolutely. We were talking before the webinar got started that absolutely, if you're not at the very beginning of an endeavor or design an intervention, planning a program, a campaign, etc., that's okay. You don't have to be at the early stages of a project to start integrating design thinking. That's part of why it's attractive to social marketers, or it should be attractive to social marketers, because it can really intersect with any phase of the process that we're doing. So if we're doing more of a research phase, if we're doing more kind of strategy development, design, promotion, evaluation, design thinking can immediately be engaged in different ways. So anytime you're doing brainstorming, design thinking has a plethora of methods that can help facilitate and that make that easier to do. If you tend to work with people virtually on remote teams, one of the tools I shared on Twitter is called Mural, and it lets you do brainstorming and different types of, it comes with pre-equipped templates that you can use and start integrating into your meetings. So it's really a discipline and a field that you can, as you get to learn more about what all involved, you'll find inspiration for how you can start using it immediately. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. I think I will actually check that out for myself. Great. So another question then, and I think this is so timely given that a high percentage just didn't know where to start. And so the question is, what is the most important first step to take in getting started?
Yeah, and I don't want to beat the drum too much, but it's really worth underscoring is the whole mindset component, and the key aspect of that being, how are we partnering with the population we're serving throughout all phases of what we're doing. So that would be where I would start and kind of evaluate and reflect on, have we asked anyone from, if you have a brochure or a website or a social media page that you're posting different messages on, have you talked with any of the people that you're hoping those reach and engage about how they experience those, their feedback on those, and maybe you already are, and maybe you have a few times, but then to challenge yourself and think about, well, how else can we create additional touch points throughout the planning and development and evaluation process to be connecting with our end users, so that it's not just through this window of message and materials testing, but earlier on, how are we involving users? And then on the back end, how are we involving users and getting the word out and promoting what we're doing and creating partnerships within users and things like that. That's where I would encourage people to start first.
Great. And let's see, one last question here before we move on. The question is, if I were to adopt the process, what changes could I expect to see in my programming?
To adopt the process, what changes could I expect to see? I hope that you see that you learn a lot and maybe change some of the assumptions or preconceived notions that you bring to your work. Something I've learned along the way is the more people you bring into a situation, that can feel uncomfortable, especially with time and resource constraints, but then you ultimately result in a better product. And I can try to unpack this more next time, but you also can save yourself time by identifying potential barriers and hurdles earlier in the process versus later, are ensuring that you avoid a pathway that will kind of become a time suck or end up encircling, and be on a more effective pathway where you're getting user engagement and just you're building yourself up to be more effective in what you're doing. So that would be my hope for you.
Yes, that is our hope as well. By providing the series is to help backfighters and educators across the nation to be more effective in their work. So thank you, Alexandra. At this time, we'll move on from the Q&A. Thank you so much, Alexandra, for your presentation and for sharing your work with us. We'll go ahead and advance to the next slide before we take off. Thank you. So yes, just a reminder. Oh, sorry. Just a reminder, on fightback.org, it is the home to a plethora of resources that we have that are free and resource-based for you to use, or evidence-based, excuse me. Next slide, please. One resource in particular that we think dovetails pretty well with this work is our evaluation toolbox and guide that you can find. It will help you evaluate your programmatic efforts and hopefully provide some starting point for you there. And it is free to download as well. Next slide, please. And of course, today's webinar would not be possible without our amazing supporters, Cargill, ConAgra Brands, the Food Marketing Institute Foundation, Tyson Foods, Produce Marketing Association, and NSF International. Next slide, please. We'd also like to thank our 2018 partners. These folks make it possible for us year-round to offer free resources beyond these webinar events. So please take note. They're very key for us to be able to do these kind of services. Next slide, please. And another reminder, the CEU certificate you can download via the handouts section on your panel. You can follow up or get them in the follow-up email or download them at fightback.org. Next slide, please. And another call to action here. So every year we receive a seal, the Great Nonprofits badge. This badge helps us with bringing some legitimacy to our work. It is based off of reviews from people that we serve, like you and backfighters. It takes maybe 3 minutes, if that. If you wouldn't mind going to greatnonprofits.org and also sharing your experience with us through this webinar, that would be most appreciated and help us become a top-rated nonprofit for 2018. Next slide, please. And also mark your calendars for October 4th. It will be a recap of everything where we bring it all together to help you facilitate behavior change in your programming. Next slide, please. And another hold the date for March 6th through 8th is the conference that we host biannually, From Consumers to Chefs, Food Safety Education Matters. It will be in Orlando, Florida at the Swan and Dolphin Resort. We would love to have you there. We focus on a plethora of topics, including, incorporating behavior change into your programming, the latest and greatest science on food safety education and related topics. We take a multidisciplinary approach to this conference, so it's extremely impactful, and every year we get 98% of our attendees say that they will come back the next year because it was that helpful. So we hope you'll join us. Next slide, please. Lastly, there will be a survey at the end of the webinar, just asking you about your experience. It's very brief, very short, but it'll help us in future webinars. Next slide, please. And thank you so much to Alexandra and Kelly and Michelle for making today's webinar possible and for making it helpful. And we hope that everyone will plan to join us again in October. I think that concludes our webinar for today. So thank you everyone for attending and for participating. And we hope to have you back in October. Thank you.